Well, I saw Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. But on the way to doing the review, I suddenly remembered I never did review Afterlife. So it's a double feature of reviews for the films. Now, I was never a big Ghostbusters fan. I liked the movies, the first one better than the second one, and that was fine. I wasn't, on the edge of my seat. What are they going to do a third one? I really, and quite frankly, and this stands to this day, I kind of thought it was a one-and-done story in a lot of ways. There doesn't seem to be too much of an approach to, give the story another angle. However, with Afterlife, you kind of get that. So, the thing about Afterlife, it's something of a hindrance, but at the same time, it's a major boost to it, in that it's respected and appreciated, in that it did the best it could to do the logical handoff from one generation to the other when you're returning to an old franchise. In an era when so many franchises were so badly mishandled as to doom them. And such was the case in 2016, a movie I started to watch and couldn't finish. But Ghostbusters 2016, as not entirely rightly, but for the purposes of argument, is ground zero for the beginning of wokedom in pop culture entertainment. Wokedom is in all kinds of aspects of life, unfortunately, but for the purposes of pop culture, that one tends to be considered a ground zero moment, especially since the template for its promotion was simply to shame people into seats. Not that it was going to be any good or funny or any of that. The primary thing was that it's all female cast, so you must see it or you're a misogynist. And that's the template that's been rinsed, lathered, and repeated ad nauseum, even to this day, with, the Marvels or the Madam Web and stuff. It's never worked. It never will. And yet it's constantly pushed because an entertaining movie was never the point. And that's why a movie that's supposed to be entertaining fails when entertainment had nothing to do with it. So, in the case of Ghostbusters, that's all it is. The Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2 were entertaining movies, and that's basically it. They had this take on of a horror element of hauntings and whatnot, and these goofy guys, despite their incompetence in a lot of ways, mostly in their social lives and whatnot, are not only proven right, but are able to heroically save New York City from dastardly entities from the Netherverse. So Afterlife comes along, and this is what you do. You do this family story of one generation taking up after the other, which one generation skipped. And we go with Egon being the one character who was even more of a true believer than Ray was, Aykroyd's character. And there is the element of, his daughter is mad at daddy and that sort of thing. But through the story, and it's rather, heartbreaking in that she comes to understand him and what he was up against. And his setup is what saves the day at the end of the film. The other is her daughter is discovering this grandfather she never knew and is fascinated about how much she's just like him, and all that sort of thing. And she's lonely and awkward and doesn't have much of a social life. She does make a friend at school and all of that. And, it's a cute story for her and everything. Her older brother is kind of in just, teenage hijinks. He's got a crush on a girl and all this stuff. And, of course, despite all the odds, it looks like they're going to be a couple. Even though it looks like he has no chance. And then Paul Rudd evens it out, and he's fine. He's good in it. And all of this stuff. And then you have the cameos of the original Ghostbusters who come back. And you have... with the use of CGI to put in the Egon character of Harold Ramis, in there, who sadly was no longer alive. Yet it played out very respectfully and very well. And of course, there is the extra touch of that. It's obvious his spirit was helping the granddaughter out through trying to figure out what's going on here. And to round out the overall reunion of it, you have Gozer returning, who was the villain from the original Ghostbusters. And so it's a nice, neat package in that aspect. And of course, in a response to Wokedom, it's excellent at that, in the sense it shows you what the other franchises should have done, most notably Star Wars, of how to do this. For the purposes of Wokedom here, where you say, oh, well, a young girl was the real hero here and all that stuff. Yeah, but she's mentored by her grandfather. Now, in Wokedom, you can't do that. Why? Because Grandpa's a man. Even when he's dead. And so that's all that. But it's the one Ghostbusters movie that in a lot of ways kind of breaks this mantle of the previous two. The third doesn't count, where New York City's in trouble. It's a massive undertaking and all this stuff, and it's the same thing. You still have the world's in trouble because Gozer's back. It's a massive thing. But it's in Oklahoma, and also the plot points to get there is this girl's discovering her heritage. And so that's a little different, you know. Whereas, hey, odd things are happening, we got to investigate what's going on. Oh my God, it's this demon and ghosts and all that. So it plays out well. It's respectful to the original films and everything like that. So it's a nice, neat package. And of course, it's boosted by the fact that it is a counter argument to the 2016 film. And I think that boosted it more than what it is as a film unto itself. It's sweet, it's nice, it's good. I don't see it as this masterpiece or anything like that. But then again, I was not a big Ghostbusters fan. I respected it for its position and whatnot. But a lot of people were very much into that and had long wanted a third film. And then, of course, you know what happened. So when this one came about, at least, you know, this. Had they done one much earlier with the original cast and stuff, could have been a lot different and, you know, maybe better, or who knows. But it's a nice, sweet, heartwarming film and that sort of thing, and a bit of a little tearjerker at the end, and that sort of thing. So fine and dandy. I think it's a good film. So then Frozen Empire comes along, because they set it up. You got this handoff, and then in this one, well, you still got the old guys around. Mostly Dan Aykroyd, for the most part, does cameos. There's some moments for him as a character that you would think would get some more follow-up in it, but it really doesn't. But I mean, for the most part, is that he can't let go. You know, he's still doing it, despite saying, look, you're too old for this. He says, but this is what I live for, you know. So, oh, well, yeah, I guess so. But anyway, Frozen Empire, it actually starts off pretty good. It's very creepy and whatnot, with this spiritual society type thing from the 20s, I believe, or turn of the century, 20th century, early 20th century. And it's almost like the beginning of a Hellboy story from the comics and whatnot. And it's basically guys who messed with something they shouldn't have, and didn't, you know, forces that have no idea what they're doing and all that. And it's the setup for it all. It's rather intriguing. It would be cool if it could have been delved in more, but then again, I guess it would take away from the time and whatnot. I'm not quite sure how you would do it, but it's one of the better parts of the movie. But what are you going to do? And so you jump ahead. They're back in New York. So here we are, back to form, and it's very repetitive of the first two films. You know, even the old guy who hated him, he's now mayor and all that, he's there, which is fine. You know, yet another reunion type scenario. And of course, they got the Ernie Hudson bought the building, so they got that back. And so, okay, fine. And so the story unfolds, but for the most part, predictably. The big bad's coming, they're going to stop it, you know. Now there's, of course, different tacks on it and whatnot, but the other story, that the strengths of Afterlife, it had that narrative been about the generations and the girl discovering her heritage. Here, well, the whole family have become Ghostbusters. It's the business they're in now. Well, the only plot point here for her now, or narrative flow, however you want to put it, is that, well, she's 15 now, so now she's an adolescent with angst, wants to hurry up and be an adult and be taken seriously, and that, she's more dedicated to this cause than they are and understands it, and so she knows better. And, is being snotty to her mother and her, what for all intents and purposes, her stepfather and that sort of thing. They do that. You're not my real dad. More or less, and that sort of thing. So, and she's still a bit awkward with people and stuff like that. So, a bit lonely, and this leads into what people are pointing to is the woke turn for the film. Right off the bat, I don't agree with this assessment, but I see what they mean. And you say, hey, maybe they're not really saying that, and all this. And then even people on the other side are upset, saying it was queer baiting. But there is a character, a young female ghost that Phoebe befriends in the storyline. And it's integral to the plot because of what this ghost is about. But you could say, well, she's found a friend that understands her, and that she's taken with that. But the setup seems more that Phoebe is more than likely gay, and she's attracted to this ghost, but she's a ghost, so. But her wanting to interact with the ghost leads to a significant plot point for the villain here. That plot point in and of itself is not too bad because the initial setup that she's mad at her parents and no one understands me and that sort of thing, and a lot of wokedom, they would see that she's right and she should be taking, everybody else is wrong and she's the the girl who should be in charge and all that. In the end, it blows up in her face. She was wrong, and she's very humbled and apologetic to her mother and stepfather and all that in the end, because she almost cost them all, and that sort of thing. But here, where it's like, oh, she's been turned lesbian for the purposes of wokeness, the reason this is immediately responded to in that manner is because wokedom has irradiated the landscape in discussion of these films and whatnot. And that if you get a whiff of what is perceived as wokeness, it turns you against it. And so a gay storyline of some sort would do that, in that was supposedly championed by wokeness. But in here, turns out they got a gay daughter, I guess. I mean, I don't know. And it's not like in the sense of a character that you swapped orientation-wise. That has happened, and that is absolutely absurd. It's happened in the comic books quite a bit. Ask Iceman and so forth. In the case of Phoebe, well, she's only been in one other movie. Granted, I suppose you could take it that her and the podcast kid are going to be a couple and that sort of thing. There's none of that here. There's not a whole lot between them like that in the first film or whatever, other than he goes out of his way to introduce himself to her. And here, it's just these quiet moments between her and the ghost, and they like each other and all that. But there's no, overt romance or anything like that. Plus, she's still a minor, so yeah. Anyway, beyond that, there's just not enough there to condemn it as woke. Story-wise, it's a step beneath Afterlife, in that Afterlife at least had something of an angle that was a bit removed from the typical template of the first two films, whereas this one is pretty much the same thing. A big bag entity takes over New York and nearly destroys it. It would be interesting to take a tack where they just go to a haunted house and save a family, something like that. To deviate from the standard. And that's about it. It was entertaining. I guess, Afterlife, I think, is better. but not by much as far as just the movie unto itself. I got a chuckle here and there, especially when the villain shows up. He has these horns that he lost back in the ancient times, and he gets them back. And I don't know. I found it funny. And then other things about, and maybe I missed it, that Phoebe's proton pack was super duper or something, because the proton packs proved to be useless against this monster, but hers managed to hold on a little longer than the others when this other guy who has fire powers comes into the interesting thing about the character with the fire powers, if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. If not, you're being spoiled, sorry. But he was in the Eternals. There's more development in his brief appearances in this movie than there was in the Eternals, and he kind of has superpowers in this movie. So, but ultimately, it's fine. It's just Afterlife, as films unto themselves, Afterlife is a little bit better. But this one, it is okay, especially since I take it some amount of heart here that she's grown to she's humbled by what happened and what she did, and is more respectful to her elders at the end, as it should be. For the most part, Dan Aykroyd does the most as far as the old characters, but they have a few okay moments here. But the thing about that is, once you've done the reunion, it is time to move on. Having them around is fine, but when you pass the baton, you pass the baton. So could they do another one? I suppose. Depends on how this one performs. But I would approach it maybe even more quieter than the previous, because you've already had the big ginormous bad. It's like the superhero movies. Once the universe has been threatened, you don't just threaten it again. Something like that. But other than that, it's fine. But this irradiated landscape, that fallout from the woke era, is going to continue, no matter how unfair it may or may not be. And in this case, I think that's a bit unfair. So there you go. Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire. Oh, and Afterlife too. Yeah. Finally got around to that.